do you have any practical insights on a PM who's watching us right now who wants to up-level themselves in some of those categories? Like, what can they do? Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be here today with Jackie, the author of Cracking the PM Interview, who is here to talk about her new book. But before we jump into it, Jackie, for those of you who don't already know, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie Bavaro. I've been in product for about 15 years now, and I started at Microsoft. I've been a PM at Google, and then I worked at Asana for 8 years, where I started as the first PM and grew to be head of product management with a team of 20 PMs. And while I was at that in 2013, I wrote Cracking the PM Interview, and I spent the last year working on a sequel, which is Cracking the PM Career.
Awesome. We're super excited to have you. I mean, Cracking the PM Interview is a book that I read when I was interviewing for PM roles. And it's just so awesome to have you on the show. I'm so excited to talk more about product management and your new book as well. Yeah, totally. I want to start off with just, product management over the last few years has grown super significantly ever since, I'm sure ever since you wrote the book, but also in the previous few years, it seems like the product management role is just becoming more popular, more desirable. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of like why that is and any reactions to the growth in product management.
Yeah. I am thrilled about the growth in product management. It's my belief that any company that's building products really ought to have somebody there who thinks like a product manager. And that doesn't have to be an official product manager. It could be an engineer who really thinks about customer goals and thinks about how to create a big impact. But I think that I really want there to be more great products in the world. And I think that the more product managers we have, and the more great product managers that we have, the more great products we'll have in the world.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, we're certainly seeing a need for a lot of great products with all of that's going on and the move to online work in a lot of ways. So yeah, I would love to transition to talk a little bit more about the book that you created. Like, tell us more about why you saw that need and why you created the new book.
Yeah, of course. So both of the books I wrote were both based off my own experiences. And both of them were based on the same sort of pattern where when I was new to the process on one side of it, it didn't make any sense to me and I misunderstood it and it was hard. And then when I moved to the other side of the process, something clicked and I was like, oh, that's what's going on. So on Cracking the PM Interview, as I was interviewing for jobs, I didn't understand what the questions were getting at. I didn't understand why they were asking the questions, what a good answer would look like. And when I switched to interviewing other people, it all of a sudden made sense. I was like, oh, when they asked me, how would you design a bathroom? They didn't mean for me, they meant like, how would you understand what your customer wants when they're designing a bathroom? And it was these tiny little things that that were just these aha moments. And I was like, wait, I could just tell someone this. And then if you can learn something from, reading a book in a few minutes or hours and do better, then that's something that would really, will really help raise the quality of people and democratize who gets to be a product manager. So that was the first book. And then this new book was based on my experiences and my pain points, where as a new PM, I didn't understand what it took to be a great PM. I saw lots of PMs around me. I saw a lot that were more senior than me. And I didn't understand what their jobs were, what they were doing, or why they were considered a better PM than me. And I didn't know what I needed to work on to grow as a PM and to be able to expand my impact and continue on in my career. And then I got to have the experience of being on the opposite side as a manager and a manager of managers, where I was the one writing the career ladders. And what I found from that side is I had this aha moment where me and the other managers really knew what level a PM that we worked closely was. And the knowing that we had, the very crisp sense we had of what defines, a PM who's whatever, if you're using numbers 3 versus 4, or PM 2 versus senior PM, it was very crisp, but it didn't exactly map onto the way we were describing career ladders and that growth. And so that aha moment, I was like, wait a second, if people really understood what becoming a senior PM really meant, then people wouldn't get distracted by like the checklists the bullet points that people sometimes think are checklists in those career growth ladders. And they'd be able to focus on what really matters and be able to be more valuable to their company, help create more impact, help create better products and help scale themselves.
Awesome. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. And I mean, just a natural question from that is, what types of things do you think adds value? Or can you tell us a little bit more about some of the insights that you learned from talking to all these product managers and some of the skill sets that, maybe we can drill into one. I know in particular, like there's a lot to do with, user research and user insight, also being able to work with engineering. Like, is there something in particular that stood out or that you think would be valuable to talk about?
Yeah, and I could actually go into, so there's one thing I found that was really interesting is across all the different companies, I looked at lots of career ladders. I talked to people from different companies. I said, what does your career ladder look like? What are the PM skills your company says? And at first, everything I heard was a different skill. And I was like, this company cares about problem solving. And this person has communication and collaboration. And this one has analytical skills. But when I dug a layer deeper into what these skills meant, the groupings were different, but the underlying skills were exactly the same. And some companies weight things differently. Some like Zynga is going to really weight analytical skills heavily. And Intercom might really weight like customer research skills more heavily, but all of them care about the same skills. And that's why actually being a generalist PM can work so well, and why it's PMs are able to move from company to company so well. So the way that I group them in the book is I group them into 4 top levels, which is, and it's not the only right way, but product, which is how do you build a great product that really solves problems for a customer and that delights people and achieves the goals that you set out to achieve. The next one is execution, and that's how do you run a team? How do you keep your team moving day to day, run sprints, do testing to make sure everything goes out, get the launch process well, and get all your time management. Next one is strategy. And love to go into this one more in the future, but this is like, how do you create a long-term vision for your team and decide where does your team actually want to go? What goals should you be setting for your team? So not just given these goals, how do I build a product that achieves it, but should we be going after more growth or more monetization or a specific type of customer experience we want to be creating? And then finally, leadership skills, which is how do you work with people around you? How do you influence people without authority? How do you do all the communication and collaboration and get the right mindset so you get things done? So those are sort of the top 4 categories, and I can go into maybe some insights on each of them if you wanted, or.
Yeah, I mean, at Exponent, we also super emphasize practical insights and things like that. And I love that, we have these categories. Like, do you have any practical insights on a PM who's watching us right now who wants to up-level themselves in some of those categories? Like, what can they do?
Yeah, definitely. So on building better products, the top insight I think is really the top practical skill is that you need to validate your ideas. And this one took me a little while, and it's funny because it's almost the exact opposite of a PM interview. In a PM interview, they say design a stove, and you don't get to go out and do any research. You don't get to validate any ideas. You can't look anything up, and you're just like, okay, out of my head, here's all the things that make a great stove. And real product management is the exact opposite. You need to validate everything. So lots of different ways to validate, and they don't have to be expensive. So cheapest way to validate something is you stop somebody in the hallway with a sketch, or you grab somebody online. If you're going to do it this way, you can chat to somebody on your at your company who's not on the tech side. Like reach out to the person to one of the admins or somebody like that, and say like, here's a sketch. What would you do with this? Do you know where you'd click? Does this resonate with you? So just showing people really quick ideas, great way to validate initial ideas. But beyond that, 2 main ways are going to be talking to customers and looking at data. So this is figuring out, do customers really have the problem you think they have? Would your solution actually solve the problem they have? And a lot of this, you can get super structured, but just talking. If you're talking to 7 customers for each new feature you're building, you'll start to see the patterns. And if you're doing, what you tend to see is in enterprise B2B type businesses, talking to customers is going to be the most important thing. And in consumer businesses, looking at the data will be the most important thing. And that's because of the scale. Are you talking about hundreds of thousands of customers or millions and millions? So when you look at the data, it's amazing how many careless mistakes, you could almost say, happen with product development. So one of the ones that I see a lot is people say, okay, we're going to invest a whole bunch of time improving this part of the app. And this part of the app is like 4 clicks down from the main entry point. And if you looked at the data, you would see that almost nobody ever even gets to that part of the app. So all this energy you're doing is only going to a tiny fraction of your users. And if you had just looked at the data, you would have seen, oh, maybe instead of improving this, we should improve the pipeline of how people get there, make that easier to see, or see if people even really want it. So that would be, I'd say, the first practical insight is just really make sure you validate your ideas. You don't need to be right all the time to be a great PM. You need to quickly find out if you're right or wrong.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I'm guilty of this mistake, and I think it's really easy to fall into that trap of, oh, I think this is a really cool idea. Why don't we do this? But it's not validated, or I make a key hypothesis incorrectly, and so I think it's an easy trap to fall into. But definitely something that is super, super important and super high lift for a product team by just making those right calls and those right decisions. So I think that's a great insight. Do you have another one that you could share? Maybe one more, and then would love to talk a little bit more about the relationship between interviewing and the book that you also just wrote too. But first, would love to hear another insight if you have to share one.
Yeah. So on execution, on getting things done with your team, there's like little ones that I'm just going to throw out there, which is one of the little ones I love is just use your processes as fun forcing functions. So like if your team is having trouble getting things done, set up demos on Friday and say that they have to like demo it from working code. And you'll find out that Thursday night, all the working code comes in because people love to demo. It's fun, but it's also a forcing function that helps the demos be the thing that is nudging people to get their work done and not you. So there's lots of ways to set up these fun forcing functions. But the one that I really think is important is on time management. And almost all of the time management advice you'll hear will not work unless you first face the fact that you don't have time to get everything done. Right? As long as you're lying to yourself about how much work you can get done in a day or a week, you're not going to have that pressure that you need to have to tell you, okay, I'm not going to do some of this work, or I'll do this work, but I'm going to do the quick and dirty version of it instead of the amazing version of it. And my favorite way to do that is just make a little pie chart of where you want to spend your time. Can't add up to more than 100%. And when you look at that, if you start, whether you say you're going to work 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week, if you look into it, you'll say like, okay, there's no way I can get strategy work done unless I cut back on some of the customer research that I'm doing, or you'll start to see these trade-offs. And I think that ends up being really important. And it tends to be, when I see people wanting to get into strategy work, top problem I see is people say, I don't have any time for strategy. And so you really have to figure out how are you going to carve that out and be truthful with yourself about how much time you have.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, time management, one of the most key skills for product managers. I love the point that none of the techniques will work unless you commit to understanding that you just simply don't have enough time in the day.
Yeah.
Would love to also, I mean, Jackie, would love to hear maybe and spin, I mean, if you have another insight, would love to hear it too, but would love to transition the conversation also to hearing a little bit more about how this book has informed some of your learnings from the first book, and maybe if they've tied together in a really interesting way, or if you'd go back and change Cracking the PM interview based on what you just learned, any sort of relationship between the two books that you've written.
Yeah. So we've got a few updated tips on PM stuff in this new book. There's a few new frameworks. And I'd say the biggest change that I would have is that the first book does not really talk about PM levels and PM seniority. So the first book is really similar advice for all levels of PM, whether you're going for an 8 PM or a senior PM or a director role. And I think one of the things that's really been clear, and I might transition into talking about this about career management now, is the career ladder for a PM is not a straight line. It's not that you start off as an 8 PM and you're not very good at these 4 PM skills and you get better and better and better and better and better and better and better, and now you're head of product. There's actually, and this was so confusing to me as a new PM. This is where I think I really got off track, is I looked at these career ladders and I said, okay, I've got to get better at product skills. I got to get better at, customer research. But those skills don't directly translate into career advancement. So one of these other things that I learned when I'm going through this book is really trying to make sure I get really crisp on what's the difference between the different PM levels. And I think that what I found is that there's 3 key phases for career advancement or for career progression as a PM. And everybody starts in the first phase, which is shipping products. And almost everything you think about as a PM in the PM interviews and everything you do in your first few years is all about shipping products. How do you figure out what product you should build, or how do you figure out what product you should build to hit these goals? How do you do the user research, the data analysis? How do you write specs? All of this is, how do you run a sprints? All of this is just to like get the product out the door. And you can get better and better at that, but there's a limit. And at some point, especially when you switch over to getting to be a senior PM, it's not about just getting better at shipping product. You enter the second phase where you're still shipping product, still need to be great at that, but now you have to start adding on product strategy. So this is where you have to think about the long-term vision of what your team is trying to create, and how do you set your team on a path to achieve something that's going to be impactful and important. How do you choose important goals? And so strategy is, a lot of it is really these three parts. It's vision, a framework, and a roadmap. So a vision is 2 to 5 years from now, what has my team going to have been created that changes the world in some way? And it doesn't have to be this like big, ridiculous, silly, like, oh my goodness, our chat app is going to really change the world. But you have to have some view of, for your customers, for the people that are using this, how is 5 years from now going to be different than it is today? What pain points are going to disappear? And setting that out is important, because if you're not trying to do something big and impactful, then all the work you're doing is in some way probably being wasted. Like if you're thinking about about having a team of, whether it's 5 engineers or 50 engineers, if they're all building small incremental improvements, they probably won't have added as much value to the world as if you set your idea for like, where do we really want to be? What does great really look like? So that's your vision. Your roadmap will tell you, like, can we actually get there in 2 to 5 years? Or did we set this up and it's going to take us 10 years to get there? And more than that, your roadmap is what helps you build the team you need to achieve it. So maybe you draw out your roadmap and it's going to take you 10 years to get there, but people love your vision. And now you say, hey, can we double the team size so we can get there in 5 years? And now when you're trying to recruit people to your team, they say, why should I work for you? And you say, well, because look at this amazing vision we're going to create, and look at this future. Don't you want to create this with me? And the strategic framework I think of as sort of the spec for your strategy. This is really the hard trade-offs, the key insights. These are the big bets that your team is making along the way. So it's not just like a computer on every desk. It's, okay, we believe that the price of all computer parts are going to go down, and that's how we think that we're going to make this happen. So that's sorry, I got into the second phase. So you ship products, you do the product strategy, and then you get really great at product strategy. You're like, I think I'm done. I think I'm head of product now. But no, there's another phase to PM career development. And so you're like, I got so good at this. And you're like, nope, I'm not good anymore. Now I have to learn product strategy. And you get there, you're like, I'm great at product strategy. You're like, nope, not that good anymore. Now I have to learn organizational excellence. So this is the idea of, how do you create a whole organization of people who can ship great products? How do you recruit people, build a team, train them, set up the processes, keep them running well? How do you make it so that you're not limited by how many teams you can personally PM, but that you're actually able to create a whole organization of people who are able to ship great products and create all that vision and achieve the vision that you set out?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think like breaking that down is so important. It sounds like a lot of the book is kind of like breaking down some of these things, or some of these processes that are just so opaque and not apparent to people from the outset, which I think is really helpful or valuable for the space. So I did want to ask, as we sort of transition toward the end of the interview, Jackie, we asked this Exponent Slack community, like, okay, what question, if there's one question we have to ask Jackie, what should we ask? And everyone said this question, or a lot of people really upvoted this one, which is the one that is one of the most classic PM questions. And feel free to be brief with this, or just give, kind of a silly answer. But, the question is, what's your favorite product and why? And I'm curious if you'd be willing to answer or give a sample answer to what you would say, at least right now, is one of your favorite products and why.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a sample, a little bit of a throwaway answer, because I don't want to create a world where all of a sudden everybody's using my favorite product as their favorite product. That wouldn't be fair to everybody. But when I think about what my favorite product is, I always think about what's something that is changing your life in some small, even if it's a small way. What's something that's changing your life that's really really addressing a pain point, really helping you achieve some of your goals. And the absolutely ridiculous answer, I'm going to have my bet right here. I'm going to not show it just for a second, is my new staple remover. So, I have a 5-year-old and he comes home from preschool with all of his artwork stapled together. And what had been happening for weeks is he wants me to unstaple it as soon as he gets home. And I'm there like picking at the staples and trying to like not tear his paper and get it all out. And I was like, I should really buy a staple remover so he could do it on his own. And I go online and I'm like, oh yeah, staple removers are these like claw, scary, sharp things. And I'm like, I can't have my 5-year-old running around with these like sharp claws. And I kept looking and I found this new staple remover, which is totally soft, doesn't look anything like those others, nothing sharp on it. And it works. You just kind of, I stapled some things, but you can just slide it in. I'm gonna see if I can do it without pushing on the paper, but you just slide it through and it just like has a magnet.
Oh, wow.
It leaves just tiny little holes. And now my 5-year-old can unstaple his papers by himself. And so reason this is my current favorite product is because it's achieving our goals, which is that for him, it gives him independence. He's able to do something on his own without having to go to someone else for it. And that's really important. And for me, it gives me more free time because I don't have to be unstapling his papers.
I love it. I mean, honestly, Jackie, like I know that was a sort of sample answer, but had a lot of personality there, had a lot of perspective on the product, had a lot of like, goal setting or sort of like what are the objective. And I thought that was a really clever, fun answer. So yeah, great job. So, I want to transition just for the very last question, Jackie, and just a bit of any last tips or anything else you want to leave viewers with. But in the meantime, for those of you watching, if you enjoyed this, definitely let us know in the comments below. If you have any questions at all, give us a like if this was valuable to you. We love making content like this, and it's always super helpful to hear what follow-up questions you have. We'll try to do our best to answer all of them as much as we can. And if you don't want to miss content like this, definitely subscribe to Exponent's channel or visit our website to sign up for a subscription at tryexponent.com, where you can get a ton of resources to prepare you and a vibrant community for your upcoming product management interviews as well as other interviews. We'll also in the description below link to Jackie's previous book, Cracking the PM Interview, as well as her new book, which I believe you can pre-order, called Cracking the PM Career. But just to leave some space, Jackie, any last things that you'd like to share with folks watching today?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people are looking for jobs. And one of the things that I've sort of developed my thinking on since the first interview book is coffee chats. So I think we probably mentioned it in there, but I think that these are really, really key and important for getting a product manager job. And so coffee chat is a casual reach out to a hiring manager or maybe somebody on the team saying like, hey, I'd love to learn about your company. Can you tell me more? I'm considering whether I'm interested in a role there. And these chats are so important because there's really a difference as a hiring manager when you're in the pitch mindset, like I'm going to try to convince you to join my company, and when you're in the evaluation mindset of like, I'm going to see if you're good enough to join my company. And you might get some of the evaluation on your coffee chat, but you also get this chance to have that pitch mindset. And this is where you can ask them questions about the company and really listen. They will very often tell you almost everything they'll be interviewing for. You say like, what makes a great PM at your company? And you'll end up hearing the grading rubric that they're going to use at their company. And it gives them a chance for them to really, while they're trying to pitch you, they'll feel closer to you. It's easier to form a real relationship. And this will make you feel more comfortable with them feel more comfortable than you. And it really can help you get interviews at places you otherwise couldn't get. And it will help you do better on those interviews when you get them.
Totally. Yeah, I think one of the most underrepresented and underrated things. And for me, it was really hard getting started. I was like, what do I say? What do I do? And honestly, just a little bit of practice made me a lot better at them and just sort of feeling more natural and just like asking questions and being genuine. So I think it's a great piece of advice.
Oh, thank you. I made one thing I'll add on to that is if you're having trouble getting the coffee chats, a lot of people, you can reach out to them on Twitter. You might be reaching a little too high if you don't get the answer. Like a big company head of product might not have time for you, but a PM on the team might. But also second degree referrals can be really helpful. So maybe I don't know anyone at this company, but I know someone who knows someone, and they might be able to put in a good word for me and say, hey, you don't know me, but I have a friend who I think is a great candidate for PM. Would you be willing to talk to her about your company? And so even those second degree referrals can be a really good way to get your foot in the door.
Totally, yeah. I think a lot of people watching this are sometimes confused or concerned, like, how do I actually get in the door with some of these coffee chats or get set up there? And I think, honestly, just being kind and open and thoughtful in your messages. And, I've received so many cold emails that are so generic or very templated. And I think just customizing that and being thoughtful about your outreach can be really helpful. So I think it's a really great point. Well, I want to just thank you again, Jackie, for being on the show. It's like such an awesome privilege to have you here, especially as me being someone who read your book when I was interviewing for PM roles. And yeah, for those of you watching, if you found this helpful, definitely like, subscribe, check out the books in the description below to get more information, and check out tryexponent.com if you want to join our interview prep community for product management roles. But thanks again, Jackie, and for those of you watching, good luck on your upcoming interviews and careers.
Thank you so much.